Right now, though, it's Monday, and he is back after the new year. Matt Randolph is here, also known as Mr. Global. Good morning, Matt. How you doing?
Good morning, Jane and everyone. How are you guys?
Excellent.
Doing well.
Thanks so much for joining us. We wanted to start off, Matt, with you have a little getting to know you video now on YouTube, which
Oh
I
yeah,
think is which I think is. Greg and I both watched it and think it's fantastic. And what I think is really important for folks to understand is that you did not come from a background of privilege. You had some bad deals along the way as you were getting into this industry. And ultimately, though, you stuck with it. You went to school and you became an oil and gas industry expert, which is a thing.
yeah,
Gavin, do
yeah.
we have
I
that? Do we have that clip from Mr. Global? This is from Mr. Global's Getting to Know You video. Take a listen.
We wrote the latest version for all the standards for hydraulic fracturing. We revised and rewrote the pressure control manual. We updated and rewrote the well operations manual, all the global standards. And when I completed that with my teammates, I received a formal nomination to be formally appointed as an expert, subject matter expert in hydraulic fracturing and well site operations. When you receive that formal nomination, what happens is it goes before a board of experts that have very high technical authority, the highest technical authority you can have. And they basically look at your life's work. They look at everything you've done in your career and where you're at today, and they basically decide if you get it or not. And I got it. So 2019, I became a formally recognized oil and gas expert.
Congratulations on that, Matt Randolph. Seriously, that sounds like quite an accomplishment, and it's not something that everybody gets.
that is correct. It's tough to get. Yeah.
Now, this happened as you were working for Shell,
Yes.
and also in your origin story. Again, you talk about some of the deals that you had made before you ultimately ended up working at Shell. I would think for some of the folks that you worked with before, knowing that you got this recognition, that's got to annoy them.
Yeah. It certainly does. Yeah. It certainly does.
Can you send this certification to all of the people that I don't work with anymore? Can you send embossed letters to them? Thank you.
I was sitting in my truck one day and I was fixing it. I had something I needed to do, and it just dawned on me like people don't know like where I started and how I got to where I am because it's not like a typical story. Everybody I know personally in this industry that holds a title that I hold are legacy people. And what that means is their parents were like executives of big oil companies. And so as legacy, they got a free pass to go into the university their parents attended. They got a free pass to join the company their parents worked for. They got their whole career was planned with their company that their parents worked at. So the oil and gas industry has that legacy thing, just like colleges and universities do.
Yep.
And a lot of the people that kind of reach the high levels are really legacy people that are brought from the beginning, and they're always planned to end up where they end up. There's not a lot of people like me in the industry that literally have to start at the bottom and work their way to that point. It's not very common at all.
Matt, do you think for those folks who are at like the executive level now in oil companies, did those guys work on rigs like you did?
No, none of
No.
them that I know. No, I don't know a single. As a matter of fact, most of the oil and gas experts I know have never worked in the oil and gas industry at all. Most of them are journalists who reported on it for so long that they just kind of became an expert or became. They're not recognized by the industry. They're
Yeah.
recognized by the media and by the public, but they're not industry recognized. The other ones are like analysts, like, you know, people that sit around and look at data all day. But there's not a lot of industry expert. I mean, there are a lot of industry experts that came the way I did. They're just not formally recognized. You know, they don't ever get those credentials from the industry. So it's not that they don't exist. It's just that they're not recognized.
That must make you crazy.
Well, it makes them crazy because I'm doing something with my recognition. Most people that get it don't do anything with it. They don't use it to benefit the public or themselves in any way. And so I decided to do something with mine. Like if I'm going to receive this title, then I'm going to use this somehow. Like I'm not just going to put it on the shelf to show to my grandkids someday.
Here's my plaque. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be more than that. You worked for it. You should do something with it is the way I look at it. So,
and that's one of the things I noticed when I watched the video was that, you know, we'll see videos of people who are like, well, I left this industry and I'm going to tell you about it. You were still working for Shell when you were talking about these aspects. And you say in the video, they weren't a fan of that.
No, not at all. They were looking for a reason. And the thing was, I was never a fit for that type of like corporate structure of big oil. Because if you've ever worked for a large corporation, you know what I'm talking about. Like
yes.
it's just, there's no freedom, like, and they don't value you. There's no freedom to express yourself. Like it's not a healthy way to live is working for big corporations. It's just not. So,
well, and you don't seem like enough of a game player to me.
That's the perfect statement, because my whole time at Shell, they kept telling me, you got to learn how to play the game. And I'm like, I'm not here to play a game.
Well,
like
that's the game.
Yeah. You know, it's the game of Survivor. That's literally, because when you work at a corporation with a lot of people who are extremely talented and you're all competing with each other, what that means is all those people are also trying to sabotage everyone else.
Yeah.
There's like alliances being formed, and it's like, it is crazy. We had people that were like recording private conversations and turning them, you know, people would walk into my office and record conversations with me, and other people too. And all those people that did that stuff got let go because, you know, that's not cool. But it is so competitive that people go to the worst. They become the worst person they can be, but out of the competitiveness that's kind of born from that.
If you're just joining us, Matt Randolph is our guest. He is known as Mr. Global. He is an oil and gas industry expert. I highly encourage you to subscribe and follow him. He breaks down how things work. He's got graphs. He's got charts. He has the expertise. He has enough facts to annoy everyone on all sides, which is one of the reasons why we like having him.
And he makes you laugh too. That's an important thing. You could take I feel like oil and gas can be an extremely dry topic, and you make it very interesting to listen to. I was very excited to come across the origin story video because I was like, you were right. Like, you're just sitting there and it just seems like you pulled over and you said, I'm going to tell my story real quick and then I could get back to work. But it was just very cool to watch. And I love the videos you're putting on YouTube, especially now, a little longer and a little more informative. But we love having you here. You're great.
Well, if you have questions about how gas prices work, about energy prices, about how much we produce, I highly, again, encourage you to follow Mr. Global on all of the social media platforms. But, Matt, we have the second Trump administration going to be sworn in a week from today. And, again, he has promised we're going to drill, baby, drill, and we're going to offshore drill, and we're going to do all the drilling, and then that is going to fix all of our problems. I found an article that says essentially the fact that the U.S. is already the world's biggest oil producer and biggest gas exporter is going to make all of Trump's goals very hard to achieve.
Yeah, and basically, you know, people are saying now what I've been saying all along for the last couple of years is we're not going to drill, baby, drill. That's not a thing. That's a slogan that Sarah Palin came up with, 20 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
Whenever it was. Because we're not at max capacity, but I mean, we're the number one producer of everything when it comes to energy. We're the number one producer of oil, natural gas. We're the number one exporter of natural gas. And in addition to that, with technology, we don't need to drill like we did back in the old days. Like, we can produce more with a lot less stuff now. That's just, so I said in one video, he should have said, maybe produce baby produce, because drill baby drill is not a thing. Like, one rig can do what 20 rigs used to do, but we're never going to have this rig counts and stuff that they focus on, that we're never going to see that again.
Well,
So
and the other thing that he has claimed is that we're going to reduce energy prices. Everybody's energy costs are going to go down, and consumers will save so much money, but that will have a very detrimental effect on the gas and oil industry, correct?
well, the real difficulty in reducing energy prices, it was the Republican Party who was going to shut down the government in 2015 if we didn't lift the export ban. If we didn't, because we had a 40-year export ban in place where we couldn't export oil, natural gas, and these things. Every single bit of the increases in oil production in the United States since the day we lifted that export ban is all being exported. So we're basically producing about 4.5 million barrels a day more than we were when we lifted the ban, and we're exporting 4.5 million barrels a day. So every single thing we have increased is going out of the country, and that is not conducive to lowering prices at home when everything's getting sent overseas. Does that make sense? Like, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Well, and oil companies aren't going to take on something that is going to decrease their profits.
No, they're not. And if you look at the price of gasoline adjusted for inflation, I mean, even at $3 right now, everyone gets sticker shock at $3. We were paying more than that like 20 years ago, adjusted for inflation. Not even adjusted for inflation, we were paying more for that in 2012.
Yeah.
So, it is 2024. It's not 1994. Things cost more, and so there is, some room there for gas prices to come down. There's, I've tried to have a trigger laws implemented through Congress that reduces exports as prices rise. There's simple things we can do that will help the consumer and bring down costs. But this notion that gas prices are so high nobody can afford to drive it's not a function of gas prices. It's a function of low wages in the United States, as far as I'm concerned. So, but that's a whole nother topic.
Well, Matt, we don't have time for your liberal agenda
Oh, yeah.
and your super crispy communist manifesto. Like, that's what it always comes back to. It always comes back to those little aspects of, like, hey, if we just paid people a little bit more, they could afford a lot. Yeah. I would love for gas to be like $2.50. Stay there. I gotta, but like $3, that's also not. I've paid way more for that, and it's just the world we live in. And yeah, but you start talking about better wages. Oh my gosh, you want to talk about getting triggered? My goodness.
We'll continue talking to Matt Randolph, Mr. Global. On the other side, we have a question come in, and we also want to talk about that new Billy Bob Thornton TV show that Greg is all excited about.
Either you love it or hate it.
And
I feel like
your
Matt.
take on it next. Stay with us. You're listening to Matenaer on air on the Civic Media Radio Network. Good morning. Welcome back to Matenaer on air. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, the board lord on the board, coming to you from our studio here at Radio Park in Racine. You can always join us, call or text. The number is the same, 855-752-4842. Leave a comment if you're watching in the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and what used to be Twitter. Our guest right now, Matt Randolph, Mr. Global. I highly encourage you to subscribe and follow him. He's on all the socials, on Instagram, on YouTube in particular. That seems, Matt, where you're devoting a lot more of your time. But if you have questions about how the oil and gas industry works, I've learned so much from you. And I see that, Matt, on all the comments on your videos, too, because you break it down in ways that's very understandable.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the charts behind you, and you can say, look, this is what happened at this point in time.
Or look, this guy's an idiot. There you go.
And if you're ever going to challenge Mr. Global, I highly encourage you to have all your facts, because that's some of my favorite stuff, Matt. When you go, yeah, that's not a thing.
I say that a lot. Yeah.
You do. With people who are coming at you, they're so sure that they're right. And yeah, they're not. They're not right. We do have a question on the text line here from Steve from Milwaukee. What is Mr. Global's take on sustainable energy? Which sources do you prefer?
So the thing about sustainable energy, it's not so much about which sources we prefer, it's how we're using each source. And so that's one of my issues. You know, the thing we're doing with renewable energy is we're just like installing it everywhere, but you know, wind is better in some places, solar is better in some places, and one of the things we're not doing, in my opinion, is looking at, okay, what is this city going to look like 30 years from now? Like, I don't think we're factoring in population growth, you know, industrial based growth and things like that, because it's not, you know, we spent decades studying climate change using, you know, science, and you know, we're not using science to install the renewable energy. It's just, here's tax credits, here's money, let's go put it up. And it's going to come back in the future, and we're going to have to spend a lot more money than we are to fix things, because we're not planning for the future. It's like we're planning for today. You know, if you look at a city that's going to double in size in the next 30 years, you know, a small mid-sized city that's going to have a lot of population growth and a lot of industrial base growth, and it's really about the industrial base, because that's where most of your electricity is consumed. And in areas where we're getting a ton of, like, you know, manufacturing and industrial growth, we're installing energy that can't sustain it. Does that make sense? So we're relying more, we're installing sustainable energy, yet still relying more on fossil fuels in those areas, because what they're installing can't handle the growth in the manufacturing base. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I've been a little bit critical of wind energy, but it's not because of wind energy, it's how they're using it and how they're installing it. Wind energy works great in some places and it's terrible in others. And we're putting it in places where it's terrible, right? So it's more like how we're utilizing it than the energy itself, if that makes any sense.
It does. And it also, again, I think it's not everyone in the oil and gas industry is completely against other forms of energy, right? That's not unusual.
You know, a lot of people over the years, they've been very fearful of it because they think it's, you know, they've always thought it's going to cost them their jobs. And I've told them, for 20 years, I've said it's not renewable energy that's going to cost you your job. It's efficiency and technology. You know, when this project used to take 20 people, there's going to be a day where like 2 or 3 people can do it. That's what's going to cost you your job. It's not those wind turbines. It's not those solar panels. It's energy and efficiency and technology in the industry we're currently in is what's going to cost you your job. And they're starting to realize that that is the truth. It's not renewables, it's advances in technology that's costing people jobs.
And I think that's going to be the case not just for the oil and gas industry. It's going to be the technological advances and the AI advances are what unfortunately is going to keep making us obsolete.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But
I just want to ask you this very quickly, but we did get a question in with regard to it. So there's that show Landman that I love with Billy Bob Thornton, and they say on there, and Tony on the live stream brings it up. They said that the price per barrel they say on the show should be between $76 and $88 a barrel. That's the sweet spot. Is that true? And 2, how much does that show just romanticize your industry beyond, like, for you? Can you watch that show?
I can watch it. It drove me crazy at first because it's so inaccurate as far as how things actually work in the industry. Like, there's not a person that does what Billy Bob Thornton does in that show. What a landman does is he or she sits in an office and looks at like contracts and land deeds. Like they don't go to the field. So Billy Bob Thornton doesn't do anything. If anything, Billy Bob Thornton is closer to me than a landman. Like, so that's like, you know, but it is very romanticized. As far as the pricing and stuff, that changes with you know, my company has a very low break even point. Other companies have much higher break even points. So that's not what they, you know, I remember that episode. It could be the break even point for that company, but it's lower across the industry. It's more like $40-$50 a barrel.
Subscribe to Mr. Global on all the socials. He is Matt Randolph, also known as Mr. Global. Real quickly, how are the chickens? Are they still alive?
Yes.
The chickens are alive. Excellent. We will stay in touch. Thank you so much, Matt. Really, really appreciate it. We got news coming up next. Stay with us. You're listening to Matenaer on air on the Civic Media Radio Network.